Alright, welcome back to a new lecture. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the anchoring method in neuro-linguistic programming. And honestly, I know I said about a lot of methods that they're probably one of my favorites, but if I want to pick my favorite, the favorite method that I use and that I help clients use in neuro-linguistic programming, it is the anchoring method. It is a revolutionary method, and that you can use over and over again in different parts in your life, in different areas in your life, to stimulate different kinds of mindset and mind states and emotions and feelings. And the thing is, it's so easy to use it. It's very simple and it's very, very effective. So let's start by answering the question, what is anchoring? Well, anchoring is a simple yet powerful process that you can use. You will be associating an internal response with a specific external stimulus. And the result of the exposure to the stimulus will then reactivate the anchored state that you are trying to establish. It is aimed primarily towards sensational anchoring. So I'll give you an example so you can understand what anchoring is. Do you remember when you walked past someone and their fragrance, you took a whiff of their fragrance and it brought back memories and associated feelings? That's exactly what anchoring is. But the way we're doing it now is that we are doing it on a conscious level. And I want to tell you about a little experiment before we move on to how you can apply the method, for you to understand it better and understand the dimensions of this method. So there's this experiment where lab mice were conditioned in a certain way. A bell would ring, then the mice would get an electrical shock. I know a lot of you right now are thinking that this is unethical, and I agree with you. The experiment is not very recent, but stay with me for just a minute here. The shock experiment was conducted on the lab mice for a period of time until they gave birth to newborn mice. And those newborn mice were also exposed to the electrical shock experiment. And same thing happened again. They kept receiving electrical shocks after a bell rings until the second generation of lab mice gave birth to a third generation of lab mice. Now this third generation of mice had the same experiment conducted on them as well until they gave birth to the fourth generation of lab mice. And here's where it gets interesting. The fourth generation of lab mice were not exposed to the electrical shock treatments. They never heard the bell before, and they never got any kind of electrical shocks. However, as soon as they heard the bell rings, they flinched. They flinched. Let that sink in for a second. How is that even possible? See, this experiment shed the light on a fascinating scientific concept called epigenetic memory. A huge part of our memory is encoded in our genes throughout our lives. And when we pass on those genes, by the act of procreation, we pass on the epigenetic memory print that we have, that you hold within you. The memory of all your previous ancestors, you hold that within you and you have access to it as well. Let me tell you a bit more. Our conscious brain processes information at around 120 bits of information a second. 120 bits of information a second. So on an average basis, this is our processing capacity. However, research have found that our processing capacity is not as limited as it seems and can go up to 11 million bits of information a second. Imagine 11 million bits of information a second. Ben Stewart gave a metaphor for us to really see the difference, saying just imagine the difference between winning $120 and winning $11 million. That's the difference we're talking about. Another example I want to talk about as well. There are some individuals who had serious brain injuries. They had one entire hemisphere of their brain removed. So we're talking about almost half of their brain that's still operating. And those people with half a brain were able to live a normal life. They went to school, they graduated, they worked, they dated, they loved, as if nothing happened. And this is all thanks to a neurological process called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity, as we saw before, it says that neurons that fire together they wire together, and this eventually gets implemented into your genetic blueprint. So, what anchoring is doing here is that you are reactivating a certain state. You're activating certain neurons and they're firing together, and the more they fire together, the more they wire together, the more the state that you're trying to reactivate over and over again becomes your normal habitual states. And that's how powerful anchoring can be. Now let's go back to our example. Do you remember an instant in your life when you walked past someone and you got a short glimpse of their perfume, and before you know it, in an instant, it brought back a past memory and a mix of emotions and feelings that you have experienced back then? Well, this is because it fired this sensational stimulation. It fired a neural sequence, a neural structure, a neural network that is associated with certain emotions and feelings. And let's say you can't relate to that example. I'll give you another one. Have you ever been in a mall, for example, or in an elevator, and you heard a song that you haven't listened to in years, and as soon as you heard the melody, it drew a smile or maybe a frown on your face? This right there is anchoring. But this is more on a subconscious level, and what we're going to look into is how we can consciously establish it. Let me give you one more example. Is there a person you know in your life who you cannot stand? A person who maybe hurt you or did you wrong? Now, how do you feel when someone mentions their name? If right now you just think about this person, how do you feel? See, even if the emotional intensity you felt escaped your conscious awareness as you got used to it, the physiological chemical reaction will be there. Now, all those previous examples are fundamentally anchors that are wired to your subconscious brain. As they can easily escape our conscious awareness, they can work as a double-edged sword. So someone who struggled with money all of his life might have an anchored state of stress when it comes to dealing with money, no matter how much money he or she is making. And here's where it gets interesting though. You can consciously create anchors. That's what we're trying to do right now. And you can associate a chosen state of mind with them. How amazing would it be if you're going through a bad day and then you do a simple gesture that changes your entire body chemistry? Pretty amazing, right? So let's talk about how you can do it. In the first step number 1, you want to identify the lacking internal state that you would want to establish. Maybe it's more motivation, maybe more love, maybe more gratitude. You need to identify firstly the lacking internal state that you would like to initiate, that you would like to recreate. And whatever internal state you need to establish, pick a specific state of mind. And once you do, you go to step number 2. You want to identify elements that can trigger that internal emotional state you're looking for. It can be some memories linked to it, your favorite song, a scene from a movie, or maybe a speech that you always heard. So if you're trying to recreate emotions of love, to feel more love flowing in your body, well then ask yourself, what is something that you can think of that can stimulate or regenerate the emotions of love in your body? And more precisely, what is something that can stimulate a lot of love? We're talking about high intensity emotions. You want to pick something, maybe a song that reminds you of someone you love, someone you cherish. Maybe you want to watch a scene from a movie, The Notebook or The Titanic, where there's this scene that just brings out all of those love emotions inside of you at a high intensity level. Once you identify what you're looking for, what kind of triggers can actually stimulate this internal emotional state you're looking for, you can move into step number 3. This is the part where you need to pick an anchor. And I'll give you some examples of anchors. It can be pressing with 2 fingers on the back of your neck or on the side of your shoulder at this soft spot where you feel a lot of stimulus. The second one is to put your hand on your heart and feel your heart. Maybe breathe into your heart. A third one is a specific fragrance or perfume that you put aside only for anchoring a specific state. Fourth, it can be a song that you really like. And fifth, it can be joining your hands, for example, crossing your fingers together and then squeezing. If by now you still feel a bit confused, you don't really understand anchoring, I will be giving you examples, solid examples further on in this lecture for you to understand it better. But just hold on with me for a second so you can understand the different steps. Now, once you picked an anchor, we want to move to step number 4. You want to establish the emotional state through the elements that you identified in step number 2 that can trigger this emotional state. Alright? So you sit down, you relax, you play your favorite song, or you watch a scene from a movie, or you do whatever you do to stimulate that internal emotional state you're looking for, whether it's love or gratitude or motivation. Alright? And you want to keep exposing yourself to the triggers and intensify the emotions. When you feel love flowing in your body, feel it even more. Empower it until you reach a peak internal emotional state that you want to anchor. When you feel that the emotions are becoming so overwhelming that you feel like you're going to explode, right? You feel that there's such high intensity emotions, positive emotions inside of you that you feel, when you reach the peak, you want to introduce the anchor. As soon as you reach the peak, you want to press those 2 fingers on the back of your neck or on the side of your shoulders. When you reach that peak, you want to take a whiff of the fragrance or perfume you chose. When you reach a peak, you might want to put your hands on your heart and feel your heart, or join your hands and cross your fingers and then squeeze. This is the part at the peak is where you introduce the anchor. And you want to repeat this process a few times until you get to the point where by simply being exposed to the stimulus, it brings out the desired internal states. That's step number 5, right? It is important to use a unique stimulus and introduce it when the emotional state is at a peak. Remember, introduce the anchor when the emotional state is at a peak, at the highest level of intensity you can feel. And when you do, you want to memorize, consciously memorize. As soon as you introduce the trigger, you want to make a conscious connection between what you feel through the trigger, whether it's pressing with 2 fingers, your heart, your hands, the fragrance. Consciously associate that specific anchor with the emotional state that you currently feel. And that's simply how you can do the anchoring process. And if you feel like you still don't understand the steps well, you need more explanation, there will be documents in this course that explains to you all the methods and all the examples that we talked about a lot better for you to understand them. So feel free to check out the documents, and there is also an action book that can help you set the steps step by step in order for you to establish and really be effective when you do each and every one of those exercises. Now moving on, I want to talk a bit about the anchors themselves. There are different types of anchors that you can use: kinesthetic, visual, olfactory, auditory, and gustatory. And you want to keep in mind that it is very important, and I'm going to say that again because if you miss out this one point, you might ruin the entire exercise. It's very important to introduce the anchor at the moment where you feel a peak in the emotional state. Do not introduce the anchor if you're having a hard time concentrating into establishing the desired state of mind. Sometimes you might be going through a bad day and you're having a hard time establishing that emotional state. Just pick a different day. Pick a day where you either feel neutral or you already feel kind of in a positive mindset or in a positive mood, and then work on establishing this emotional state that you're trying to reactivate, that you're trying to anchor. And another thing to keep in mind is that the anchor, and this is also a very important idea, so please listen carefully, make sure that the anchor you're using is unique. Don't use an anchor that you would usually repeat, as it might create confusion. So you don't want to use, for example, scratching your head as an anchor, because you might do that often, right? You want to introduce an anchor that is unique. If you're introducing a fragrance or a perfume as an anchor, you don't want to use the same perfume that you wear every day. You want to get a little bottle that specifically the purpose of it is to use it for anchoring. And you also need to put conscious effort into associating the anchor with the state of mind. When you reach an emotional peak and you feel that emotional peak building up, you introduce the anchor, and then you consciously associate the anchor and what it feels with how you feel on the inside, and then remember that. Moreover, The anchoring method, if used effectively, will have instant results. Yes, this is one of the few times where instant results is not a scam. It does instantly work, meaning that if you did the process well and you relax for a few minutes, then you use the anchor you established, you should be able to feel the emotional state that you associated with it. So let's say you did the anchoring exercise and preferably repeat it about 2 to 3 times. And then just take some time off, go for a walk, breathe a bit, go eat, and then once you sit back down, just introduce the anchor. Put your hand on your heart or put some pressure on the side of your shoulder or smell the fragrance, and automatically, as soon as you do, you will notice that emotional state that you anchored, you will feeling it building up again. Now just imagine how powerful this can be when you're having a bad day. When you're having a day when you're not feeling motivated and you anchored a fragrance that you take a whiff of with a sense of intense motivation. And then as soon as you feel that you're not really motivated, just the simple act of taking a whiff of the fragrance will get you back into a motivated state. Maybe not at the same intensity of the peak you reached, but the reason we want to reach a peak is because now even when you introduce it, even if the emotions are not really intense, but you were already in a peak emotional state, so they will be as intense as they can be at the moments when you introduce the anchor. And you want to keep in mind that the anchor should be held until the state has fully stabilized, and it should be released before the state starts to diminish. So if you're taking a whiff out of a fragrance, you want to smell it 2, 3, 4 times as you are in this peak emotional state, and then close the bottle and put it aside as you feel the emotions going back to normal. As soon as you feel the emotional peak dropping, this is where you stop introducing the anchor. Alright? You only introduce it at the peak. Now you need to also make sure that you are in a safe and calm environment when you use this method. You don't want to be distracted. You want to be focused, you want to be concentrated, you want to be calm, and you want to get it right. And lastly, before I give you an example, I want to give you some key information here. Some ideas to keep in mind. Sometimes you might find it hard to generate the emotional state you're aiming for, and we talked about that. And that's okay. Instead, what you can do is wait until you naturally feel the state of mind. And when you do, intensify it and empower it. And when it reaches a peak, you can then introduce the anchor. So if you're trying to introduce a mindset or a mind state or emotions and feelings of motivation, and you just can't seem to introduce anything that will put you in that emotional state, wait until, for example, you get back your exam results where you got an A+, and you will naturally feel that you're in a motivated state. And this is when you can introduce the anchor. So pick a time where you naturally feel in that state and then work on intensifying it. Once you feel a certain state, it's way easier for you to intensify it and empower it. And once it reaches the peak, introduce the anchor. Now the anchoring process should be repeated about 3 to 5 times. You want to repeat it 3 to 5 times to make sure that, and every time you do it, you consciously associate the anchor with the feeling so that your brain is forming a new neural network there. And again, if done properly, you will notice a very quick change and the anchor will work almost instantly. You can use the anchor for a variety of reasons. You can use it to become more productive, more motivated, more energetic, more loving. You pick. And notice how I only used positive emotions when using the anchor. Don't think about the negative feelings you want to eliminate, because this can create confusion. Instead, focus on the positive emotions and feelings or states of mind that you want to associate with the anchor. And lastly, enjoy the process. Make it fun. Don't stress about it. Alright? If it didn't work the first few times, it's okay. Review the system, see what you're doing wrong, and then practice makes perfect. Do it again and again and again until you establish an anchor. And once you perfect one anchor, you can set as many anchors as you want in your life. You can associate feeling your heart with a feeling of love and gratitude. You can associate pressure on the side of your shoulder with a feeling of being motivated and inspired. You can associate smelling a certain fragrance with feelings of being courageous and confident. You name it. You can use as many anchors as you want, and you can introduce into your life bit by bit, and they can be life-changing. So I'll give you a quick example now before we end this lecture for you to consolidate what we talked about. Let's say I am trying to anchor a state of confidence. I have a problem talking to people in social gatherings, and I wanna solve this problem. I wanna be more confident and more courageous. So what do? I go on Amazon and I look for, any fragrance bottle, a cheap one, expensive one, up to you. Buy it and wait until it's there. And in the meantime, I start identifying some elements that can make me feel more confident. Now, 2 days later, I got my shipment, I got my fragrance. I don't smell it. I only smell it when I want to introduce it as an anchor. So I sit down, I close my eyes, I take a deep breath, and then I play one of my favorite songs called Legendary by Wellesley Arms, which really stimulates feelings of confidence within me, all right? And then I listen to motivational speech that talks about being confident and having this courage in social gatherings and in social situations and just owning it. And then I close my eyes again and I start imagining myself being so confident in social situations, talking to people with no problem and just acing it. And I keep feeling those feelings of confidence and courage, and I keep empowering them with more mental images and more stimulation, external stimulation. And until I feel a peak that I'm unstoppable, that I can be put in any social gathering. You can throw me in front of Elon Musk right now and I'll have a conversation with him that's pretty impressive. And as soon as I feel that, I open the fragrance bottle and I smell it once, twice, and then a third time. All right? Then I close it. Just relax for a bit, go for a walk, breathe. And after maybe an hour, I sit back down and I take a whiff. I smell the fragrance a bit and I see how I feel. And if you did the steps properly, you will feel the confidence and a rush in your body building up again. And if not, reintroduce the anchor. Do it again. Repeat the process again and again and again until it works. And if you do it properly, you can then introduce as many anchors as you want in your life. And it can be life-changing, I promise you. It's one of the favorite methods that my clients use. It changed people's lives drastically. And now you can use it to change your life to the better. And if there's any information that you missed out on, that you're not sure of, make sure again to check out the document and the action book related to NLP that can help you and walk you step by step through the process again. I know this lecture was long, but it had to be long because there's a lot of value in it. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I really hope you'll try the anchoring method soon and let me know how it goes. And I'll see you in the next lecture.